Okay, let's talk about IU basketball. No game yesterday, no game tomorrow, no game in the general area of the week. We'll preview IU Purdue on Sunday. Sorry, that game is on Sunday. We'll preview it on Friday. We're going to talk about IU regardless, though, and the question of whether or not they have a viable path to the NCAA tournament as an at-large team. Of course, they have a chance to make the tournament because they are still playing, and they will more than likely qualify for the Big Ten tournament. And once there, win the Big Ten tournament, qualify for the NCAA tournament, just like that. But let's talk about whether or not they have an at-large resume. I believe they do, and I am intrigued by that because when you look at Indiana, you don't really think tournament team, at least in terms of the NCAA tournament. There's a sizable gap in the schedule right now. They haven't played recently, so that gives Jerry Palm and Joe Lunardi plenty of time to update the bracketology according to their resume. Jerry Palm has them in the first four out, actually the second team out behind Georgia. And the next four out is where Joe Lunardi has them. He's a little bit less thrilled by the Hoosiers. They're 15 and 11, 6 and 9 in the Big Ten. They're 57th in the net. Now, when you see 57, you think, oh, that's above 68. Indiana's a tournament team. Not quite, because obviously the net isn't a one-to-one translation to the way the committee would act in I suppose the committee room when they're on Selection Sunday when they're determining who's going to the tournament. But also, bid thieves exist. So you look at that 57, but you also have to understand that the 68 best teams in the country don't make the NCAA tournament. There's there'll be 6 16 seeds, there'll be 4 15 seeds, there'll be, plenty of teams that win their conference tournaments that are barely worthy of being in the tournament, or definitely wouldn't be if they had not won their conference tournament. Plenty of bid thieves. So that 57, and as you start adding in the 16 seeds, you start adding in the champion of the Colonial Athletic Association, whatever, that 57 kicks down to 58 to 59 and eventually out of 68. And that's why Indiana's not in the field right now. Those bid thieves, 57th in the net. They're 2 and 11 in quad 1, 3 and 0 in quad 2, 6 and 0 in quad 3, 4 and 0 in quad 4. You hear that and you think that's great, and it honestly kind of is, because most teams in the country have at least one loss in quadrant 2. Indiana triumphantly beats everybody that is below them in the net, right? At home, on the road, if it qualifies as a game lower pedigree than quad 1, they win 100% of the time. That has to continue, but that's a good sign, and that's part of the reason why Indiana is so close is because they don't have any bad losses to bad teams, right? They have bad losses in terms of margin of victory, but they don't have bad losses in terms of the net, in terms of the team just being lower quality. They're 2 and 11 in quadrant 1. That's the slight concern, is that Indiana very much struggles to beat teams at their level or better than themselves, which indicates that once you get to the actual NCAA tournament, Indiana's going to be in a situation where they can't win a game. Maybe they're in the first 4, they win, and then they'll get blown away by the 6th seed, whoever it is, because they can't beat anyone above them. But they've shown that they can, and that's kind of why Indiana is where they are, and in position to play their way into the NCAA tournament as an at-large, because they beat everyone below them. They don't have any bad losses to bad teams, and they beat Michigan State. They beat Ohio State. Those are tournament caliber teams that they have wins against, that they could potentially replicate in the tournament to indicate that they would deserve to be there by beating teams better than them. So 2 and 11 in quad 1, not good, but they have 3 quad 1 opportunities remaining. They have 1 quad 3 and 1 quad 2 game left to play as well. So the question is, what has to happen for Indiana to qualify for the NCAA tournament as an at-large team? Obviously, that depends quite heavily on what the rest of the bubble does. What do the teams around them do, right? Does Georgia succeed? Does Wake Forest succeed? Does North Carolina succeed? VCU? Are those teams going to continue winning? Are they going to lose? How is that going to impact Indiana? Are there going to be more bid thieves than usual? Is the 14th best team in the ACC going to win the tournament and steal the bid in the NCAA tournament? Is 2 teams from the American Athletic Conference somehow going to get in? Whatever it is, right? Whatever the conversation is, Indiana, their position and their opportunity to go to the NCAA tournament is very much dictated by what happens around them. But here's what they have left. They have Purdue, which is a quad 1 game. Penn State at home is quad 3. At Washington is quad 2. At Oregon is quad 1. And Ohio State at home is quad 1 as well. And then they have the Big Ten tournament. At the moment, the 12 seed, they would play Minnesota. And a win, I believe, would indicate that they would play against Maryland and then Purdue. Those would be their 3 opportunities then. So 3 quad 1 opportunities remaining. One of them on Sunday against Purdue. Potentially, they could play Purdue again in the NCAA tournament, or in the Big Ten tournament if they continue to win and if the standings shake out the way that they are right now. Obviously, things depend on what happens around them in the bubble. But as long as IU wins their easy games against Penn State and Washington, that's expected because they've never lost, again, a quad 2, quad 3, or quad 4 game. The one that concerns me is Washington just because it's so far on the road, and Indiana hasn't done that and succeeded so far this season. That's one concern for IU at the moment. If they win both of those games, then if they win one quadrant 1 regular season opportunity, which again is a tall order, but they play Ohio State at home. They beat them on the road earlier in the year. Oregon is slipping and struggling. They play them on the road. Purdue, obviously, rivalry game, again, in Assembly Hall. It's not unthinkable to suggest that IU could rip off a quick quadrant 1 win. I think they need a quadrant 1 win again this season in order to, in the regular season, to make the NCAA tournament. Granted, if they go to the Big Ten Tournament Championship, they're probably in anyway. But as far as the regular season goes, you want to see IU pick up another quad 1 win, either against Purdue, Oregon, or Ohio State. Of course, that Oregon game's on the road. So if they win one, then they can win 2 to 3 Big Ten tournament games and be in, right? So let's just say, for example, IU can lose to Purdue. They can win their 2 easy games. They can go to Oregon and lose, but they beat Ohio State. Then as long as they take care of business as the way the Big Ten tournament currently sits, as long as they take care of business against Minnesota and Maryland, and then upset Maryland, they're probably in. Maybe they would need another win against Purdue to make the semifinals. But if they win one quadrant 1 game, so that they go 3-2 the rest of the way and they beat and lose to the right teams, I think they can just make the semifinals of the Big Ten tournament and be totally fine. Maybe the quarterfinals. If they win 2 quadrant 1 games, they may not even need to make the quarterfinals, right? They could just beat Minnesota in the play-in round, I suppose, or the first day, and then lose on the second day and be fine. So to me, IU, the formula is, as long as we assume that they're going to beat Penn State and Washington, which is logically pretty sound because, again, 3-0, 6-0, 4-0 in quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4, as long as they win those games, then you only need one. You only need to make the semifinals or the quarterfinals of the Big Ten tournament if you win one quadrant 1 game the rest of the way. If they manage to win 2, then it's even less than that. The fact that they have 3 quadrant 1 opportunities left is very beneficial. Georgia plays in the SEC; it's very difficult. But some of the other teams around them in the bubble, Wake Forest and North Carolina, SMU, they don't have nearly as many quadrant 1 opportunities left on their schedule because the ACC just isn't that good. And once you get to the conference tournament season, again, the ACC simply isn't that good, and SMU, North Carolina, and Wake Forest are not quite going to have the same opportunities to win. Arkansas might lose right away. Georgia might lose right away. 2 other teams in the bubble just because the SEC tournament is going to be so difficult. But the environment around them is going to be difficult to manage. Bid thieves exist. It's going to be difficult to see how that goes. There's 3 ACC teams above them, like I said. That's Wake Forest, SMU, and North Carolina, according to Joe Lunardi. They're all in the area of IU. There's 3 ACC teams, which means they have a high chance of playing one another, at least in the rest of the regular season or in the tournament. They'll probably be in a similar area. Maybe that's an 8-9 game somewhere. They'll be in a similar area of the bracket, most likely, is my point. So in the ACC, those teams could take each other out. The SEC could take each other out. VCU could just lose and then fall out entirely. Obviously, as long as Indiana keeps winning, they'll keep their position and only rise because bubble teams tend to lose just because they're bubble teams and they're frequently at this point in the year playing teams better than them. To me, IU, again, to reiterate, if they beat Penn State and Washington, they could either win one quadrant 1 game the rest of the regular season and then have to qualify for the semifinals, maybe the quarterfinals if they're lucky of the Big Ten tournament, or they could be in a situation where they win 2 quadrant 1 games. Maybe they win both the games inside Assembly Hall. Maybe they go to Oregon and pull off a win. And then they only need to win 1 or 2 tournament games and qualify for the quarterfinals or potentially just the second day of the tournament. That's what I would want to see if I were an IU fan. I suppose I kind of am wearing the sweater right now. I think that this is a situation where, again, it's manageable, it's doable. The game against Oregon is going to be absolutely massive. The game against Ohio State, again, absolutely massive. This Purdue game, gigantic. That would be their best win of the year if they manage to knock off Purdue. Especially inside Assembly Hall. Maybe the game on the road against Michigan State is technically better, but still, IU against Purdue, massive game. The rest of this season, it's going to be difficult, but it is manageable and it is doable and it is workable, and we could be in a situation where after Coach Woodson steps down as the world screams that he should be fired, maybe his team ends up going to the NCAA tournament. That would be a very interesting situation to watch play out. The next step is beating Purdue at home, securing a quadrant 1 victory down the stretch. They only have 3 wins against future tournament teams, Michigan State, Ohio State, and I counted USC in that category. Are the only other teams that are potentially quad 1, quad 2 tournament wins. Purdue would be a team that is potentially projected to go to the Sweet 16. They could pick up a win against them this Sunday. We'll preview that game on Friday. It'll be huge, but IU does have a path to the NCAA tournament as an at-large bid. That's what I'm looking forward to see from IU, and it all starts this Sunday against the Boilermakers.